there's this sort of pressure point, isn't there? What does the player do? Brian Mbeumo clearly made it obvious to Brentford when he went back into training that he wanted to leave for Manchester United, and that kind of then brought the clubs back to the negotiating table, and they ultimately agreed a deal. It does, that agitation element, and clearly United have leaned on that, haven't they? With Sesko, for example, they only made the bid when they knew that he wanted to join Manchester United. I think they had an indication before that, but they were absolutely certain that he was going to be on board with coming to Old Trafford. It feels like they're there in that kind of capacity with Baleba, but to what extent is he going to try and push for a move, or equally he's not going to push for a move if United aren't prepared to put significant funds down, because why would you? I think you have to be wanted by the club that you're going to.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe, that is Jay, and we are joined as always by Laurie Whitwell from The Athletic. Laurie, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic, guys.
That's a great smile.
Good.
You like
It's
that
a lovely
film smile. It looks a little bit scary, Laurie.
Almost.
I'm not going to lie
worrying.
to you. It's like
you've seen United's transfer window. That's why you're so excited, isn't it?
It's actually because I'm seeing you guys again. I missed you since being back from the US. So beautiful to be in sunny Manchester, isn't it?
This is it, man. It was like a little reunion, wasn't
We've brought the sun with us. And we've also brought the Dave's Hot Chicken with us. But we don't need to get into that. We had a little bit of chicken before this. That's what we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about Carlos Baleba, not just where we're currently at with this deal, but also how United can afford this. There was a great article from your colleague Chris Weatherspoon in The Athletic. Also, there's been a great article from you and David Ornstein, I believe, today, talking about where we're up to and how this can get done. Because it felt at the start of the window, United might have no money. And then all of a sudden, not only have we got some money, we've got a lot of money somehow. So we'll get into all of that. But let's start with the current lay of the land with Carlos Baleba then. What's Manchester United's interest? What's sort of Baleba's thoughts, and what is Brighton's consideration of all of this?
Yeah, I think Brighton's consideration is probably pivotal because they have the player. He's got a contract till 2028 with a +1 option, so he is pretty much locked in for Brighton. I know that as contracts go on, players' values do diminish, but it feels like they've got a good sort of runway there for their player to decide on what they want to do with him. But obviously his own opinion is important as well, and it's our understanding that he is keen on a move to Old Trafford. He's aware of the kind of scope of a salary package. He's been players from United have been in touch with him about the current landscape, and I think their feeling is that they're quite happy with how things are going, so are communicating that to him. Let's see. There's intermediaries working on it to sort of try and ascertain exactly Brighton's stance. They're saying he's not for sale, but I feel like that's the starting point really on any situation like this, where you've got a club that would absolutely love to have him on board. Ruben Amorim, is certainly a fan to our knowledge. The club, though, wider than him. I think it's a united front on this one, because an Athletic number 6, we were here, weren't we, a few episodes ago when we were joking about who that Athletic number 6 might be. You pointed your finger my direction, Joe.
After your fantastic performance at Old Trafford.
Thanks for bringing that up again. I don't think that gets spoken about enough.
Just to clarify, you brought that up, but it's also worth pointing out. I was going to anyway.
Tried to gaslight you there.
Yeah, exactly,
Still spoke about it to this day by you.
The thing is, Laurie, I'm still pushing for that move.
Okay, fine.
I've got a no to Baleba sign and a yes tick to Laurie Whitwell sign.
Let's just say combined, those two transfers might cost 80, 90 million.
That's a very good point.
So that's two players for good value.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I'm obviously joking there about the financials of it, because some people will say, he's as good as Moises Caicedo, and he went for 100 odd million to Chelsea a couple of years ago. There's a counterpoint where Brighton sold João Pedro to Chelsea this summer. He's 23 years old. He was their top scorer in the Premier League last season, joint with Mitoma and Welbeck. But a striker for 55, 60 million. So you're getting these kind of different reference points, I suppose. United's approach in the market so far has been 60, 70 million, hasn't it, for the three players that they've bought in for significant money. So can something be done there? Like I say, Brighton are of a very strong stance, and there's certainly some scepticism that it can get done from people, but you do sort of wonder if it progresses, as these talks go on. Like I say, Baleba's own view on this will be a factor, but ultimately it's Brighton's call really, and I think that's what the talks currently are trying to explore, the exact truth of.
How much does it affect the situation, the fact that Brighton have just sold Pedro, as you mentioned there, so they're not exactly in dire straits, or desperate for money because they've just obviously made a big profit on him. Does that come into it, do you think, or do you think that's almost irrelevant?
No, it's relevant. I think, I suppose the only point is that their whole model is about buying players, giving them a platform to develop, raising their value, and then selling them. So this is part of their design. He will leave Brighton at some point. It's just sort of when, for how much. Now, next summer, there could be fierce competition for him because at the moment, Liverpool, Man City, those kind of clubs aren't necessarily in the market for him or a player of that description, whereas United very much are. So they're sort of thinking, can we steal a march, really? But then again, next summer, you never know, something might happen this season where he's not actually at the same value as he is. He's had 2 brilliant years in the Premier League so far, so you could argue, is this his peak value? So that's all the kind of factors that I think Brighton will be considering. United will obviously hope that they, agree that perhaps there is a fee that can be agreed upon that would see him move to Old Trafford. But yeah, they're trying. Like I say, I don't know how likely it is right now, but I feel like at least United are making that kind of move, and then maybe we can get on to how and why they're able to afford it, and the kind of football reasons for going for it. But yeah, I think it's an interesting transfer to observe anyway.
Massively.
Can I just ask, on that? I think you spoke about this in the past. Do you think there is and this might be a daft question, but I'll ask it anyway, a PR element here for other players joining Brighton? Do you think that comes into, because I think we've spoken about this. Me and you spoke about it. I remember talking about this years ago.
And Boomer as well.
And Dortmund. I remember years ago talking about Dortmund and Jadon Sancho, where it's like, the message to players, if you come to our club, you get a couple of years, and then if you get a big offer, a club bigger than Brighton, with all due respect, we'll let you go if the money's decent. Does that come into it at all? Just sort of the message it sends to other players, rather than trying to keep a player that wants to go, who's been offered a good move that they want? Yeah,
I think it is a factor, because if that's part of your selling strategy, then I mean to sell the club to players coming in, then you kind of have to abide by it. But then at the same time, Brighton, I think, are well within their rights to say, we don't want to sell him this summer. If they don't want to sell him, that's up to them. That's absolutely fine. And I think the player would have to just get on board with that. Now, I guess there's this sort of pressure point, isn't there? What does the player do? Brian Mbeumo clearly made it obvious to Brentford when he went back into training that he wanted to leave for Manchester United, and that kind of then brought the clubs back to the negotiating table, and they ultimately agreed a deal. João Pedro, for example, he was left out of the final 2 games of the season, wasn't he? At the end of last season, he had an altercation with a teammate in training, so there was perhaps
one way of getting a move.
I'm not sure that was necessarily part of his getting a move. I think that's just sort of part of his personality, maybe. But
I will beat up one teammate per week until you let me leave. Clock starts now.
I should not have mentioned that with you two, should I?
You didn't say that, by the way. That's just me.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
No, thank you very much. But I mean, it does, that agitation element, and clearly United have leaned on that, haven't they? With Sesko, for example, they only made the bid when they knew that he wanted to join Manchester United. I think they had an indication before that, but they were absolutely certain that he was going to be on board with coming to Old Trafford. It feels like they're there in that kind of capacity with Baleba, but to what extent is he going to try and push for a move, or equally he's not going to push for a move if United aren't prepared to put significant funds down, because why would you? I think you have to be wanted by the club that you're going to, and clearly he is, but to what degree, and then how much am I then going to react to that? But yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic, and I don't think on this United will make a bid unless they are confident that they can get the player. I think they've waited, haven't they, in previous instances this summer. Certainly Cunha was a release clause. Okay, the Mbeumo one I think had some agitation to it because they went in lower than what Brentford were anticipating, and then Sesko equally, they knew, I think, at the point that they were making bids that they were going to get him. So yeah, let's see how it develops.
I want to get to the details of the financial stuff in a minute. In terms of the way United have handled this, it was I don't want to use the word smokescreen necessarily, but it sort of shocked people a little bit, didn't it? Because we all knew that we wanted to address this attacking line. We were keen on Delap, didn't happen. Cunha obviously was sorted early. Then we got on Mbeumo. We all knew that a striker was on the cards, just depending on who and how. And then the midfield thing was like, maybe they'll get a midfielder next. And then, so that makes you think, right, well, it's not really a priority. So it's certainly not going to be a 80 to 100 million pound midfielder that we're looking after. Because United never went, to Baleba thinking he was going to cost 25 million quid. And yet that seems doable. Maybe we need to sell first, or not, obviously the finer details we'll get into. But do you think United have not been sneaky, but kind of held back their cards a little bit so that the other deals were a bit more smooth, and that other clubs maybe didn't go for Baleba thinking that there was going to be a bidding war with Manchester United. Do you know what I mean? The way they handle this is unusual for United, isn't it? Yeah,
I think that shows tact, really, and I don't know if that was absolutely what's been going on, because I feel like there's been I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but maybe a bit of a gear shift since they had that summit in Iceland where they went fishing potentially, and Jim Ratcliffe was there with Omar Barada, with Jason Wilcox, sort of face to face, and from that point then Mbeumo got sorted. Sesko, the move for that clearly had some momentum behind it, and maybe they were able to kind of evaluate, okay, if we pick our pieces correctly, is this the way that it'll all fall? But I think also, that makes sense, right? It's a bit of a poker game, the transfer market. You don't want to show all your hand, from the get-go and scream from the rooftops, how excited you are to potentially get this player. So I think that's a sort of sensible thing to do. But yeah, I think there is also been a bit of a shift in terms of what they're able to do. Because I was sort of told, I think the last time we spoke, in terms of Benjamin Sesko, that it looked perhaps unlikely because of the transfer fee involved and the fact that he hadn't necessarily blitzed through the Bundesliga last season. But clearly they'd come to a conclusion that he was worth that money, and they needed to go for him now ahead of, I guess, waiting another year or trying to pursue Rasmus Hojlund up top. But I think there has been a bit of a shift in terms of mentality. I think personally that they really want to back Ruben Amorim. They want to back the current football structure. Jim Ratcliffe, I'm talking about, wants to show support to these guys, and they can't afford a bad start like they ended last season. Sorry.
I mean, that bad end last season.
It's just bringing tears to my eyes.
It's all emotional, Laurie, at the time.
We're with you, bro.
Would you like a drink?
I'd love a drink. Yeah, sorry about that.
Someone can get you a little drinky. I'll get you one now.
Thank you.
Yes, we've got you a glass of water there because you were soldiering on like the professional that you are, Laurie. I wanted to just ask you, because I find it very amusing, about Newcastle's involvement in the Sesko transfer. And when I say involvement, like how much did that sort of speed things up with United, or make United realise that, look, if we don't get Sesko now, we might not get him again, because Newcastle were obviously very keen on him. I know they've got their own issues in terms of who's pulling the strings or whatever, but they were obviously trying to get Sesko.
Yeah. I think it was a factor, because I'm trying to think. So it was about 2 weeks ago, right, when we were speaking in Chicago, and at that point, to my knowledge, there weren't active talks on Sesko, and then Newcastle had to start getting a move on because Alexander Isak was clearly looking for a move to Liverpool, and so I think that did kind of accelerate things from a Manchester United point of view, and there was obviously some degree of, I guess, concern from people with Old Trafford in their hearts that he might go to St James's Park, but I don't know. I kind of feel like once United entered the process, I think they had a bit of confidence that it was going to happen, because they, Christopher Vivell was there. You've got a guy who's worked with Sesko before, basically sort of signed him twice, once for Salzburg and once for Leipzig. And so I think he was probably aware of the situation, but it's a club call. I think he was pushing for it, but equally I think that the club didn't need any persuading on it. I think Jason Wilcox, Ruben Amorim, Omar Barada, aligned on it, and they were kind of in Chicago, having meetings with Amorim. In fact, the Glazers were there for a period, a couple of days in Chicago at the Waldorf Astoria, their team hotel.
Saw them at the
did
game
you?
there, yeah.
How did you say hello, or
no? There's always a sort of crowd of people around them
asking for autographs.
Saw Darcy at the first game, I think, in New York.
Okay.
The sister, and then saw
very rarely spotted.
I've seen in the last two
the
pre-season
rarely
tours.
spotted Darcy.
The rarely spotted Darcy.
Right,
not said anything. Just sort of gone past it. Oh, who's that? Because you don't see her face.
I don't know if I'd recognise her, to be honest.
No, and then Avram at the Chicago game. Yeah,
right. Yeah,
but again,
she just looks like Avram and not.
Oh right, okay.
More hair at the front.
Yeah, it just looks like Avram.
Okay,
more hair.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so they were there. Were they there for the purposes of having this chat, or was it just to see that United and all that?
They enjoy the pre-season tours because they can go watch United, mingle with the players, and they don't get any heat, right? Like if they came to Old Trafford, there'd be a lot of attention. Although having said that, they have done it occasionally at times, obviously Wembley for FA Cup finals, and it's kind of passed without too much aggravation, shall we say. But I think it's it's in their own country. It's a kind of relaxed situation for them. So yeah, but I do think they were, abreast of what United were going to try and do, because it's a lot of money, right? And they are involved in these kind of decision, shall we say. But to my knowledge, I think by the time they'd shown up at the team hotel, it had already been decided that they were going to go for Sesko.
Okay.
It's just looking when I was reading your article, and it just seems how, I mean, from what I read, like how smoothly it all seems to go.
The Sesko one.
Yeah, how everything seems pretty joined up, and it's like you know, they want this player. Vivell obviously knows him. The manager's happy to bring him in. Jim Ratcliffe wants to back the manager, and then they get that deal done. Especially when you juxtapose it with what you were saying about Newcastle, who've not got, is it a director of football in place?
Yeah, technical director, no chief exec, I don't think either. So
they've got certain people trying to get this done and making sort of almost felt like, to look at the two deals in tandem, it was like one was sort of scrambling around and, oh crikey, what we're going to do, and the other one was like, right, this is the process we're going to go through. Speak to the player, Amri speaks to the player, player wants to come, we can do this deal. It just felt like United, I don't say this very often, but we're acting like pretty well run.
I think that's probably fair. I mean, I do have an element of sympathy for Newcastle because they are in this state of flux. Although having said that, it's maybe, some of their own doing, because you've got Paul Mitchell came in and left pretty, quickly. I mean, I know Dan Ashworth came in and left pretty quickly, but there's nobody there now doing his job. So, I think there was perhaps a slight air of desperation with Newcastle trying to put bids in. They got one accepted. Sorry. They obviously got one accepted, but United, I think, always had that calculation to them and knew what it would take to get Sesko. And, they got it over the line.
It's interesting with Sesko as well, isn't it? Because, like you said before, it didn't necessarily seem as though we were after him. And then all of a sudden, it's not only we after him, but we're actually like so certain he'll join us, we're going to let you just bid away, you silly little Newcastle fools. And then we'll just come in and pluck him up for less than you bid. Like, how have we gone from not knowing which striker we want to maybe Watkins, maybe Sesko, to actually... Thank you very much, we'll have that. How did that happen so quickly?
Yeah, it's a curious one, isn't it? I mean, I suppose that, Omar Barada said at the end of post-season tour, they've got the plans in place, they know what they're going to do. Clearly Liam Delap was part of that, and I think they thought, right, if we get two players in straight away with release clauses, that's a good platform. I do, like I said, and then they had to change approach because Delap chose Chelsea. They looked at other strikers, Ekitike, there was a call placed on him, for example. We've already spoken about Gyökeres and Osherman and various other strikers, but they've obviously had like a pretty extensive list of players they would consider. Ollie Watkins, it came down ultimately to Sesko and Watkins, right? And maybe there was some support for Watkins internally. Amarin has said he wants players with Premier League experience, and that's why Cunha and Mbeumo have been brought in. So you sort of thought, okay, well then does Watkins follow that same path? I think maybe you've also got the club thinking, well, if we go for the younger player though, okay, it's a bigger financial outlay to begin with, but he's got that potential higher ceiling and he can develop with us, and you've got a longer run at it. So we've given you two players that have got that Premier League readiness. Let's try the striker that we've tracked for years. This isn't after the event, United have been scouting him, and like it felt like it used to happen, when Alex Telles sort of joined, it was like, we've been scouting him for years, and it was like, well, you've sent scouts to like watch his match, wherever it was, and it's not like you actually were actively after him. With Sesko, it's different, Domzali, 2019, 2022 as well, when he then agreed to go to Leipzig from Salzburg. Even 2023 and 2024, we're told, each of these years they kind of asked the question, and each time, for whatever reason, he didn't join. They have now got him. I know that at the start of the window, he was looking at Arsenal, right? They were definitely in for him. They couldn't get it done. Quite a complicated deal. United had been able to get it done, and certainly negotiations with Leipzig were much more smooth than they were with Brentford. And I think that's, to your point, something to be acknowledged. But yeah, I can't say exactly why, it's been a kind of unveiling in this way, but I think you've got people there that obviously, have expertise in this, have got that track record, and ultimately you had a player that wanted to join. He was up for leaving Leipzig this summer. It felt like the right moment in his career. So it was basically, in the end, Newcastle or Manchester United, and Manchester United had the cachet, the heritage, the potential future that Newcastle weren't necessarily able to offer.
Just on the Arsenal one, I know you talk about in your piece, was it because at one point it looked like he was going to Arsenal.
Yeah.
It looked like Gyökeres, Arsenal weren't interested in Gyökeres. Because we were like, maybe Manchester United will go for him, because where else is he going to go? Because there's not that many suitors. And then all of a sudden, it felt like all of a sudden that just went a little bit cold, and it was like, it sort of just just ended. What was that? I know you mentioned, was it like the director of football not being keen? Was it just the deal? Was it the complications you said in the deal? Because United got it done, so you thought Arsenal would have been able to do it.
I think the overall cost of the deal was something Arsenal didn't feel comfortable with. So like you've got various costs, haven't you? Wages, agent fees, the transfer fee. I think it was talks were difficult on it. So yeah, maybe in full time that'll come out. I mean, obviously they're playing Arsenal this weekend, so maybe Mikel Arteta will be asked about it at his pre-match press conference. I'm sure he'll tell all. That's the exact forum for getting into the nitty-gritty of a transfer deal that didn't happen. But you never know. As time goes on, the exact sort of details that might come out. And I'll try and report that on The Athletic if they do.
Perfect.
Just a little plug there. But yeah, it fell away, didn't it? And I think it was the overall cost of the deal. And then instead, they've gone for Gyökeres, and it'd be fascinating. It's mad that these two players that you sort of thought might have been heading in opposite directions are now on different teams, and let's see how they do on Sunday.
It's weird to me. It's very sort of, I don't know, sort of intriguing that everything felt lined up. If you wanted Gyökeres to United to happen, to make it happen, like he is literally this manager's player. He's the player that catapulted this manager into the United job, essentially. Not single-handedly, because it was a great system and a great team, but when you've got a guy scoring more than a goal a game for you, that's going to turn people's eyes to your attention. And for some reason, it didn't happen. Whether we didn't want him, I think it was down to him. He didn't want to join us. And it's just very interesting to me that Arsenal didn't really want him, and then all of a sudden they did, and then United players didn't seem to. Some of the staff didn't seem to want him either.
Gyökeres.
Yeah, is that correct, or is that Gyökeres not fancying it?
I think Arsenal always had Gyökeres and Sesko sort of together, but it did feel like they were progressing on Sesko at that point, and maybe they had chosen him, but they couldn't get the deal done, so they pivoted to Gyökeres. I'm sure Gyökeres is, Camp would say he was always in the mix, and they were just exploring alternatives. That's fine. In negotiations, you want to have some leverage, don't you? You want to have alternative options, and I think United had always sort of intimated. People at United had said to me, it's unlikely, with Gyökeres. I think he wanted Champions League football ultimately, and Sesko I'm sure did as well. I think he wasn't. I think he was, like I say, hoping that Arsenal would get done. And then it didn't, so that's a sort of period of readjustment for him to sort of think, okay, well, if it's not going to be them, Manchester United feels like a good alternative because they're aiming for that, aren't they? And he spoke pretty excitedly, didn't he, about a fulfilment of a lifetime's ambition. Or his agent, I think, posted something to that extent. So yeah, I think he's certainly fine, more than fine, about being at United. But I think Arsenal were a genuine possibility for him early in the summer, and likewise for Gyökeres. I think ultimately he wanted Champions League football,
especially with Gyökeres as well. What is he, 26?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying obviously he's got a lot of years left in him, but you can imagine he'd be more sort of anxious to play in the Champions League and also play for a team that is pretty much guaranteed Champions League football every season, isn't it, under Mikel Arteta. They're thereabouts. I mean, they also started doing quite well in the Champions League as well. Maybe hasn't quite got the longevity and the patience that someone like Sesko can look at and go,
I mean, he could give it 4 years at United. Yeah. If they don't make Champions League at 26, could they then do the move that Gyökeres has done?
Still be in the same position as Gyökeres, so it kind of makes sense to me.
Let's have a look at some of these sort of numbers then, because this is the kind of the thing underpinning all of this is how Man United are able to fund this. Because at the start of the window, depending on who you heard, and it wasn't, I'm not just quoting you here, but just
come at me.
The general, it might not even have been you, but the general feeling around Manchester United was they're not going to have a lot of money. Yeah. It's going to have to sell to buy. We've got to try and get these guys out. Ratcliffe telling us that we're going bust by Christmas. And then next thing you know, we've spent 200 million quid and are keen to buy a player that is, everyone knows is going to cost around 100 million more. What's happened? How have Manchester United got the money for all of this business?
Well, have they got the money? I suppose that's one big question. Okay. They might have the borrowing facilities to pay for this. I think that's one point to make. And you mentioned Chris Weatherspoon, my colleague, sort of found a really fascinating detail within the accounts buried in there that intimated it was a little bit unclear exactly what it suggested, but then checking with the club, and we think that basically it's an increased amount that they can lend from the banks. They've got this revolving credit facility. They've kind of had it since COVID, really.
What is a revolving credit facility?
I'm glad you asked, Joe, because I know exactly what it is.
Oh, good.
What can I make up here? Listen, it's basically like a company credit card, isn't it?
Okay, right, that'll do.
We've said this before, but it's slap it on there and we can think about it another day, pay it back in instalments, or there's interest to pay, right? So it's not, if you've got cash, that's better than having this, because you're then, paying off something that you didn't need to necessarily add to. But then again, debt is, the world goes round on debt. It's people have mortgages, etc. That's that kind of concept. But clearly, United as a club, I don't think should be having to do this, because they make so much money in revenue. It's obviously a kind of a byproduct of having the Glazers as owners and plunging the club into so much debt when they took over the club, and then also the kind of mismanagement of spending big on players and not having them reap the rewards on the pitch and having to spend again and changing managers and that kind of thing, not getting money back for the players that you're selling too much. So yeah, they're in that position. So how can they afford this kind of stuff? I think there's a few things that have also happened this summer that maybe have changed the landscape, where they necessarily weren't anticipating. You have the sell-on clauses for Anthony Elanga. That's quite a big transfer that he went through with Newcastle. Alvaro Carreras as well, even Maxi Oyedele going from Legia Warsaw. So you've got a little bit of money there. You've got the Rashford coming off the wage bill, so that's like 14-15 million. You've got also the fact that they've been able to pay these transfer deals in instalments, which I know is not necessarily a novel thing, but I think that is something just to be recognised, that okay, whilst the headline figure might be 60-70 million, it's perhaps actually only 20 million this year. So added together, they can afford it, just about. Also, a big thing is that for PSR calculations anyway, the year that was the biggest deficit for their overall attentiveness to the PSR sort of regulations has fallen off. So you've got 2022-23 is now no longer part of the 3-year rolling cycle. So yeah,
was that a particularly big year?
Yes, that was the Anthony and Casemiro year. So yeah, that was quite a lot of money that sort of went out of the club. So yeah, I feel like but equally they do need to sell still. So let's not get this wrong. Like I think they can obviously sell later in the window. They can sell even in January. They can sell even next June. The deadline for PSR is June 30th. So as long as the cash works out for them, and so therefore this borrowing facility comes into it, if they can sell later, they can make the numbers work in terms of the Premier League and UEFA financial regulations. But it does then change the negotiations maybe with clubs that they've got. If their clubs know that they've got to sell, then are they really going to push the boat out for signing Alejandro Garnacho, for example? I think that's a question to be debated. But yeah, we'll find out, I think, again in due course, because it is a big question to ask, because all the noises were, we haven't got the money. I mean, obviously, as you say there, Ratcliffe saying we're going bust by Christmas. I think we kind of debunked that at the time, didn't we, really, in the reality of things. Like he was talking about cash flow and how at Christmas time that does dip, because you're not getting the sort of income from ticket sales or broadcast revenue. So that's a kind of annual thing that happens. But clearly that's a separate thing then to being able to actually put money down for players coming in.
Yeah, because everyone, whenever we talk about transfers, and no doubt people in the comments will be saying that, everyone asks about that Ratcliffe interview.
Yeah,
was he lying? What was he doing? Was it that dire, or was he just exaggerating? Or you know what I mean? I think it was like a question that I always see in the comments. It's like sort of people a bit, I wouldn't say confused, unsure as to what his sort of motive was there.
He's trying to justify the job cuts, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Because he was saying that without these job cuts, we would have gone bust by Christmas. He said it once, but even so, you're the co-owner of a football club that's publicly listed. Like, you need to sort of be able to back up what you're saying. And so, yeah, I think it was obviously a lot of pressure around the club at the time, and he was making cuts, second round of redundancies. And so to sort of try and explain the dire financial state that the club was in, and the club it's right. Like it's fair enough to sort of point out the issues that there are with the club, but obviously they do also have to speak to the New York Stock Exchange, and so this wasn't any part of the New York Stock Exchange, messaging that they'd had. So it did run counter to that. But yeah, in my opinion, he wanted to sort of explain to people how he felt the club was in such dire straits, and and justify ultimately the decisions that he was making.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it certainly, it does seem to be the case, doesn't it? And at the time, he was catching a lot of flack. And even during that interview, he seemed a bit sort of off the cuff at times, didn't it? Rather than
he says what's
He's
like
in his mind.
Yeah, he seemed like
he is like that.
And you can debate, can't you? Like, would you rather have someone that's like that actually communicates with the media? I certainly, from my point of view as a journalist, I admire, I encourage people to speak, but equally, you then, I think, able to scrutinise what they say, if they do so. But yeah, I think that's what his personality is like, right? I mean, I think he gets on with people who are direct. Ruben Amorim said that to us in the interview in Chicago, that, Ratcliffe said in his interview, I think it was the Times and Telegraph, that he tells him to fuck off if he oversteps his boundaries when he's at Carrington, and sort of telling Amorim where things are going wrong. And Amorim said to us, well, yeah, he doesn't like bullshitters, and I say things naturally, I say things direct, I have him respect, absolutely, but I know what I know, and I'm able to communicate that with him. And I think Ratcliffe, so that's all part of him sort of trying to speak directly to people.
So it's a respectful fuck off.
Yeah,
when he says
that's a nice one.
Yeah, Sir Jim, fuck off. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Go away.
You've surely given a few respectful fuck-offs in your time.
That's the only fuck-off I usually give as a respectful one.
If you honour him as a Knight of the Realm, Jim,
sir.
Fuck the sir off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he goes, fair play. off I fuck. In terms of, so where we're up to now then, so Sesko's done. We think we're going to make sales, and hopefully we don't have to in order to afford Sesko. Is Baleba a situation where we could buy him before sales, or do you think that would be pushing it too far, even with this extension on the revolving credit facility?
I think it'd be pushing it. I mean, like I said, I've not analysed the numbers to a degree where I would be absolutely adamant. And like I say, these things have changed throughout the year. It feels like every single summer we say United have got no money, and then they end up going spending big.
That's true.
Because ultimately the pressure of United... sorry, getting to my larynx. The pressure of United... makes people sort of do things. It feels a bit similar to Erik ten Hag's first summer, when they lost the first two games, then they were like, right, we need to actually back this guy because they might not qualify for the Champions League. And at the time, the Glazers were looking at selling the club, really. I think that was in the offing at that moment. So, they backed him, put money down, and ultimately they did qualify for the Champions League. So, similar thing here. You've got a manager, head coach that Ineos have picked. You've got football executives that Ineos have appointed. So they need this to work, really. And I think getting off to a good start in the Premier League is essential. And so, yeah, I think they still have to sell. But whether they do it before or after, if they're able to somehow do Baleba, I think that, sales will have to happen. And that's why you're getting Rasmus Hojlund clearly being ushered towards the exit. He's not featured at all against Fiorentina. He was on the bench until the final 18 minutes against Everton. That's clearly what the club are sort of showing him a future, once Sesko's in the building. Yeah,
I think we read your tweet out on the watch along.
Did you?
Yeah, at the end of the watch along, didn't we? Or it might have been the review after the watch along on Rasmus Hojlund, because is that how you see it then? I mean, we were debating and discussing it on the weekend, like, is this the club just saying, look, you go in, basically.
I think obviously Amorim's got a agency in it, but yeah, it was always my feeling that you might get to this stage of the summer if they brought a striker in that they would need to balance the books. And Hojlund is obviously a saleable asset. He's still 22. There's clubs he could go up and tear it up somewhere. You could certainly see that back to Serie A or somewhere in Germany maybe. He wants to stay though, so he said that publicly. And now you're going to get this pressure point, aren't you, where how will it be that he either leaves or he stays at the club and fights for his place? But that's why him not featuring against Fiorentina is telling to me. I had some people after I tweeted that sort of saying, you don't know, you're just speculating. If you're starting Mason Mount up top, as much as I love Mason Mount, you are clearly making a signal to your actual striker that you have on the bench that is potentially what's going to happen as the season continues. So I think it was a message.
I always thought with Amorim, it's been a bit, I don't know, up and down with Hojlund, because there's been times as well when I know he's played a lot of games under Amorim, but you had Zirkzee, who's not a striker, then he was injured, wasn't he? Then you had Cheeto coming in. Then you had there was one point I think where he tried Kobe Mainu.
Yeah, it's Crystal Palace.
Yeah, he's never felt to me like he's fully been on board with Rasmus Hojlund. It's almost like there isn't any other alternatives, because those little signs, like the Mainu one was really telling on it. I'm pretty sure Hojlund was available then. It was like, look, we'll give. And even Cheeto getting as many minutes as he's getting as a 17-year-old at times it looks like you're just thinking the manager doesn't quite fancy him.
Yeah. I mean, he's bought by a different regime, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And so maybe this was always going to happen, because you want your number 9 to be at United. I know Sesko's not going to be the number 9, but that centre forward, someone with presence, someone with real aggression, and Hojlund sort of had that, and certainly he's got confidence around the place. I think he still backs himself, you know what I mean? I think that's why he's coming out in the mix zone of Chicago and saying, does anyone want to speak to me? You know, I will put my point across here, because, you know, he'd scored, to my money, 2 goals in that game. I know there's some debate about the second one.
I didn't even realise I missed all this.
Because it's a friendly, it was given to Ahmad. But I think if that was been a league game, the ball did hit him.
Yeah, it did. You're right. Because I watched it. Just a case I didn't even notice it.
Who cares? It's a friendly. But yeah, he did.
Yeah.
You know, he had what would be 2 goals in any other game.
So I think he's still got that confidence, but then on the pitch, it feels like he's running in not quite the right areas. He's obviously trying hard, but it feels like United want to move on from him. So, yeah, let's see.
With just on the sort of outgoings front then, so we'll stick with Hojlund for now. Obviously, United want to get rid of him. That chicken you had earlier has really done a number.
Are you okay?
Is that what it is?
I'm worried about
it. Dave's hot chicken?
Maybe you're allergic to it. Is your throat closing up, or is it just a
what's
tickle?
Happening. Yeah, sorry guys.
No, I don't apologise. You keep talking too much. Every time you're talking, I'm seeing it, and I think your eyes are getting red.
I need to just stop talking, don't I?
No,
if you want to just nod,
sign language.
just nod.
Yeah.
Okay. You asked me an extensive question.
I'll ask the question, and then Jay can give me the answer you would have given.
Yeah.
Do AC Milan?
This will be funny.
Go on.
Yeah. Go on.
How keen are AC Milan on Rasmus Hojlund?
Oh my God, they want him. yeah, they are so keen on him.
Really?
They're absolutely foaming at the mouth for him.
Really?
Yeah, honestly. I think the deal's probably getting done as we speak. That's mint, Laurie. Thanks for that exclusive.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Are we getting Baleba?
Watch Talk of the Devils.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no need for that, Laurie.
I thought he was going to tell us. No,
do watch Talk of the Devils, though, just not now.
The link is in the
After
description. In terms of Hojlund, it felt like Inter Milan, then that's not happening. Now it's AC Milan. How strong is that interest? How advanced are those talks?
I think they're looking into it. I think there are a few clubs looking into it, though. And it then comes down to, what do United want? I think they've accepted that they're going to have to agree, if they are to sell him, a fee less than the book value. The book value is about 45 million.
What does book value mean? What is that?
So it's just basically how much... So when you sign a player, you amortise the transfer fee over the length of the contract. So I think, was it 5 years for Hojlund? So 64 million was the base fee. So divide by 5, spread that out. It's not quite as simple as that, because you've got associated fees that are linked to it. So, I don't know, agent fees or signing on fees. So what I'm told is that it's about, at the moment, 45 million for him. And the relevance of that is PSR. So if you're taking a book loss on a player for selling him, but it means you've actually got cash. So it's that dance, I suppose, we were talking about earlier, between cash and the PSR calculation. So, I think hopefully I've explained that to a degree. Okay, great. So what will they accept? And maybe is it going to be a loan? But then again, you don't get the cash immediately. But I think they'd want a loan fee in that sense. His wages aren't particularly high, so it's not like you're making a massive saving if you do just get him totally off the books. But there's other clubs, clubs in Germany. For example, I've been told about RB Leipzig being, interested. I don't know exactly where that's at. Borussia Dortmund, another one potentially. Obviously Newcastle maybe need a striker. That would be an interesting sort of end game in this whole saga. But like I say, as it stands, he's saying that he wants to stay at United. So I think there's still some sort of talks to be had on that.
You sort of can see or think it could work with him as backup, haven't you? You said that.
Yeah, I think the cash side of things, I think it makes sense if we can get 30 million or 6 now with a promise or potential for 30 or 35, whatever it might be. I can see that, but I think we'll need another striker. If Hojlund leaves, do you think United would be happy just having Sesko as the number 9? I know Zirkzee can play there, and Mbeumo can play there, or Cunha can play there. Do you think that's what they'll stick with?
I think so, yeah. Just because, as you say, Zirkzee, it's interesting, honestly. Zirkzee's kind of not really been a part of this conversation.
He's gone under the radar a little bit, hasn't he?
I think because he's been sort of working his way back to full fitness this pre-season rather than being playing. I think that's part of it, but also it's a different style, so I think they do quite like having that alternative centre forward role, because if he if he starts up top, then you kind of want then Cunha and Mbeumo to be going through and occupying that front line really. Whereas if Sesko's there, he's the one stretching the defence, and those two can kind of work in the pockets, behind him. I think the fact that they've not got European football this year, he wants a small squad. He doesn't necessarily want to rotate between loads of different strikers. Yeah, so I think he'd go with one. Well, Sesko, if that was the. I think
it's just it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because, like you say, Joe, if Sesko was to get an injury, even if a 6 weeks, whatever, then you look and you go, we're in trouble here. Because can you play Cheeto all those games? Can you try Zirkzee up front all those games, or Bruno in a false nine, or whatever, or even Ahmad, whatever? It doesn't quite work. But then you think, well, he might not get that injury. So if he doesn't, and then he probably does work.
38 games. Yeah, he's played quite a lot of games.
Yeah, I think it was 34 in the Bundesliga last season.
Record.
I know he wasn't starting every time, but he's enough.
Yeah. It's just a weird scenario, because then you look at someone like Cheeto, who's a good player but still only 17. It's a weird situation. I think ideally, if Hojlund moves on, I'm with you, you probably get an experienced striker as backup. But
I think the thing is though, we had Mason Mount up top against Fiorentina. I'm not saying that is going to be a regular occurrence, but you're going to have quite a lot of players that aren't getting game time. When we talk about all the number 10, so maybe he just thinks that if that's the situation, if Sesko does get injured, I will just play Mason Mount up top or Kobbie Mainoo or somebody else.
If you could play Kobbie Mainoo or Mason Mount up top, surely you can play Joshua Zirkzee.
Well, there we go, or Zirkzee.
If you're going to try that, and obviously
I think he do first.
I know he's a 9.5, but he's still more of a striker than Mainoo or Mount is. Sorry? Exactly, isn't it? It's like you wouldn't ever thought. I never thought Mason Mount or Kobbie Mainoo were people that would lead the line.
It's weird as well, isn't it? Because I think depending on what the expectation for the season is, you're more or less likely to be up for doing that. Like if we'd finished second last season, I think going into this season with one striker would be suicide, because you have one injury, drop 8 points in 5 games and your title challenge is over. Yeah. Whereas for us, I think any European finish or above would be considered a success, or could be seen as a success next season. And you can probably have a couple of suboptimal weeks with strikers who aren't really strikers and still get 8th or 7th or 6th or maybe even 5th. So I think maybe they're accepting the fact that this isn't quite as fine margins when you're dealing with Conference League and above as it might be in other seasons, so we'll just take a chance. Garnacho I want to talk about next, because he's an odd one, where he's gone from being 12 months ago sort of the darling of Manchester United, him and Mainoo in particular, to being just sort of open season, everyone hates him. He falling out with the manager, he's vaping, he's not turning up
vaping while getting tattooed, he's
sticking his middle finger up.
I missed the vaping actually.
Yeah, there's a picture that looked like he had a vape in his hand while he was getting a tattoo. Just sort of thing my mates would do, but he's not just one of my mates. He's meant to be a professional athlete. So he's sort of, everyone hates him now, not literally, but that's the perception. And yet at the same time, we have to try and sell him through the fact that this club and supporters are just like, get rid, whatever. How are United doing in terms of trying to get a decent fee for him? What's the latest with Chelsea?
Yeah, it's going to be Chelsea, right? That's the anticipation for the whole summer. It feels like they're now progressing with it. Well, they are. But to my knowledge, to this point, they've kind of been offering players, as part exchange, and players that United weren't interested in, really. Okay. So I think it'll ultimately get done. I don't know at what price, because I think we started the summer at some clubs being told 70 million, then that kind of being reduced to sort of 60 million, and now, sorry.
Do you have a minute?
Sorry.
Do you want something to eat?
No.
Is there a chance that you could knock it down?
It's always kind of felt like Chelsea were going to be his destination. He's certainly been waiting for them, hasn't he? And so talks are progressing to that end now. I think Chelsea waited, haven't they, until the end of the transfer window, because to your point, the more that it looks like United have to sell him, the lower the fee you'd think would be. He's obviously posting on Instagram, isn't he? Kind of in the gym, kind of egg timers, I think. Sort of he's
you know what? I just love a cryptic post by a player.
Yeah,
not absolutely warm. Yeah, to be fair, that's not that cryptic, but it's just it does matter.
Yeah. Makes you really warm to them as a person,
do you know what I mean? It's just like,
and that's antagonised fans, hasn't it? It's interesting how his reputation has veered from young hero to get him out.
It is sad.
Chelsea to this point, I think, have been trying to offer players. No players that United would particularly be interested in. I suppose Nicholas Jackson was one that they perhaps had a slight consideration over. But now I think it's going to be a case of money. And at the start of the window, it felt like United were asking for 70 million. I mean, certainly that's what they communicated to some clubs. 60 million then maybe was also communicated. I wonder where this is going to end up, because you're sort of, ticking down and down. I wonder, right? I mean, Amarin said that we have a price in mind. If they don't match it, he will be reintegrated into the first team squad. I mean, do you think
sounds
that's
like
going
a threat? Doesn't it? He'll be reintegrated into the first team squad.
I'll reintegrate your face.
Doesn't sound very welcoming, does it?
Fist, mate.
Yeah, I think
integrate this.
It was like widely reported, wasn't it?
Imagine Amarin as a character in EastEnders.
I love
think
it.
that could happen.
Was very EastEnders-esque. I like that.
Now the Queen Vic.
Yeah, I mean, it was said was it the quote of, you better pray you get a club or something? A lot of people were saying that.
I think it was something like, you better pray you've got a good agent.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people reported that.
Or you better have a good agent.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like it's just untenable for him to come back.
I don't think there's any realism, is there?
Yeah.
I think he's obviously putting that out there just to kind of say, you never know. It could be, like at the end of the January transfer window when Rashford, there was some noises that he could come back.
Yeah. Managers always do that. Ollie did it with. Do you remember when Ollie did it with Sanchez and everyone lost their minds? When he was like, Sanchez, still a good player. If he comes back, we'll be happy. And everyone's like, we can't have him back. But it's obviously.
What do you expect them to say at that point? I mean, he obviously has been pretty strong in other ways with him and made his opinions clear. But I think he has to sort of say that, doesn't he? To kind of give United some leverage in these conversations. And you never know. I mean, maybe they just keep him and he doesn't play.
How long has he got left,
It's not. It's actually still quite decent, because he's really due a new contract. That was part of the issue as well, that he was on sort of like 50 grand a week, and you felt that a player of his, he was playing a lot of games, right?
Yeah, 140 games for United.
Yeah, he's a regular, isn't he?
I think, is it 3 years left on his deal, something like that, or maybe 2 years left. So it's enough anyway. I think it's actually 3. So that's not really that much of a consideration in this whole sort of dynamic, other than the fact that he clearly wanted a new contract for quite a lot of last season.
Is he? So if he were to stay and not play, does he have to just suck it up, or is he in a position where he can? Is he even like buying his way out of a contract or anything like that? Consideration, is that not even a thing?
I hadn't even thought of that really.
Yeah, because is he stuck at United basically? Is what I'm getting at. If he doesn't go to Chelsea and we don't sell him anywhere else.
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
because players would do that all the time. Well, Isak would probably do that now, wouldn't he? If you could just go.
Right. I didn't know if it was like after so many years you could do that, or if it was so much left. Or I'm getting that completely.
I don't
wrong.
think I've never heard of it, unless it's like a buyout clause that someone's got, and then they obviously, I think they maybe sometimes have to pay it themselves, and the club has to give them money. But sorry. But the key thing is that it's a World Cup year next year, and he wants to play in it for Argentina, so he's going to have to be playing for a club regularly to have any hope of that.
Some of the other sort of players on that list, the phrase bomb squad has been used, but I don't really understand what that means. I know we just say it, everyone just says bomb squad. What is a bomb squad? Isn't that the team of people that like defuse bombs?
Yeah.
Surely they're the opposite.
Well, Deontay Wilder's got a bomb squad, hasn't he?
Who invented the bomb squad for United? Do you know?
I don't think it's a United specific thing, is it? It's like
who called these players? Garnacho, Sancho.
Is it Chris Wheeler?
I think we've even used it. My editor actually asked me, he said, do you mind me using the term bomb squad?
Right.
And I was like, it's a bit cliche, and it's like everything's a cliche these days. And he's right, because it's an instantly identifiable situation that these players are in, right? Because they've been bombed out. Isn't that where it comes from?
No, I get the idea of it.
Right.
Like, I understand it, even if I think it's a bit naff.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to who's the first person covering United to label this group of players the bomb squad. I'm with you. Wheeler was the first one I saw, but I don't know if others had used it. I was just curious as where it came from.
As soon as those 5 players are exiled, basically, you think of them in your mind as the bomb squad.
If you're Tyrone Malacia, you're going, sorry, excuse me. All I did was I hurt my knee.
The bomb squad.
Next thing you know, I'm with all these lot who won't turn up for training.
But
go on.
Well, the whole knee thing, he went.
He lied.
No, he didn't lie.
That was brutal. He lied to us, Laurie. He just lied. He's a liar. Wow. So a minute ago,
I got so carried away.
You stitched up for him, and then you went harder on him than anyone else. He lied to us.
And then you think, what else? What other
Poor
problems?
little cheeky Tyrell. I
Sorry,
feel sorry for him.
right.
Then you're like, no, and he went, he lied.
Sorry, let's just swipe that from the record.
No, let's keep it.
The whole
record.
knee
But,
thing.
Yeah, what did he do wrong?
Well, he went abroad, didn't he? So there was he chose his own path, and then it ended up being a longer injury absence than expected. I'm not saying that's then absolutely put him in this category, but I think there's he has a close relationship with Rashford, so that's an interesting aspect to it all. Rashford was clearly part of the he was exiled from the first team squad before anybody, wasn't he? I think ultimately though, what United will say is that these players want to have new experiences elsewhere, so why would they be around the first team picture? Kind of maybe not with the mentality of we're all in this together, we're a part of a new journey that's going to be a fantastic future, and so cut them out of it, let them explore those new opportunities, and we'll do our own thing with the first team squad. It's pretty brutal, right? And you might say, well, what have they done to necessarily deserve that? But at the same time, I think Amorim's not in any, he's not sentimental, right? He's pretty clear and ruthless maybe to a degree. I think you have to be an elite manager. So yeah, that's why they've been, should we say, I don't say I like, the exiles is kind of why I've termed them.
I like that. Just in terms of some of the other players on that list then, so where are we with Jadon Sancho and with Antony? Because it felt like Sancho, there's a few clubs knocking about, a couple in Italy, a couple in Spain, a couple in Germany. Antony, it's been just Betis. There doesn't seem to have been any movement on either of those in the last sort of couple of weeks that I can think of.
Yeah, I think it just, again, comes down to clubs wanting to wait and seeing what kind of deal they can get at the end of a window. I don't know what it is. It just gets a real tickle and then it squeezes up and I'm like, I can't actually get my words out.
I can't actually speak.
I can't speak. Jesus.
Just give you a closed question where you just go yes or no answer.
Okay.
Yeah, far too open these questions.
Shall I do that? I can do that.
Go on.
Yeah.
Right, just tell me what you're doing.
Well, I'm gonna do it. Okay.
Laurie's struggling a little bit. Go to the wide. Laurie's soldiering on here. He's struggling.
Sorry, guys.
This may get a little bit more quick fire here. Joe's going to ask him a little bit more closed questions than normal because we don't want to, hurt the poor lad.
So to close this out, I'm just going to pep you with some yes or no quick fire questions. Okay.
Fine. I can even nod or shake my head, can't I?
Even better. Do you expect Sancho and Antony to leave Manchester United this summer?
Yes.
Do you think we will get a fee and a permanent deal for them both?
Antony, yes. Sancho, I mean, he's only got 1 year left on his contract, so. But I think it'll be some kind of configuration of that. I think he will, if it's a loan. I've just not even given you one word answers here.
No, if you feel comfortable,
keep going.
Go for it.
I'll keep going until the tickly throat strikes again. Yeah. It might end up being some kind of mutual termination. Something like that, like it was with Ronaldo.
That's what I was getting at. Not he can buy his contract.
Right.
And it's obviously not going to happen with Garnacho, and he's got 3 years left.
Yeah.
But I think there is a deal where obviously club and a player can agree with it, but we're not going to do that with Garnacho when he's worth. A lot of money to us either way.
It would have to be, in Sancho's case, it would have to be make financial sense for United to do it. If they, so like saving his wages maybe. They wouldn't just pay him off his whole contract because what's the point of that?
Lastly, then, goalkeepers. That seems to be the sort of the final piece of this jigsaw. I think if United were to get a midfielder, whether that be Baleba or a player of Baleba's sort of kind of setup, and a goalkeeper, that would be the last position where you think these were obvious areas we needed to improve. After that, we can kind of tweak and improve and make the team better. What's the latest in terms of keepers? Donnarumma, a name that's been mentioned. There's been others mentioned as well. What's your understanding there?
Yeah, I mean, the Donnarumma one is interesting because the picture at PSG is fascinating where they've signed a new young goalkeeper from Lille who
Chevalier.
Thank you. You saw me sort of searching, trying to figure it out.
No, sorry. I know him very well considering only because I spoke about him this morning.
Oh, did you? Brilliant. Okay, good. 23 though.
I'm the last person you'd turn to for advice about Lille goalkeepers.
Thank you for saving me there.
Yeah.
He's 3 years younger than Donnarumma, so clearly that's the route they want to go down for their new number one. My colleague James Horncastle has reported that he's open to leaving, but he won't be forced out to a club that PSG just select. And he obviously got agency himself. He's only got a year left on his contract, so that's why. Okay, could Manchester United be that outcome? I think quite a few people would be excited by that, right? He's obviously done great things with PSG and Italy. my information is that it's not one that United are pursuing, though, just to burst any kind of bubbles there.
So it's just Donna rumours at this stage.
Nice, very good. Well, I think Onana's convincing Baleba to come anyway, and so don't, you know what I mean?
We owe Onana
don't
another
like
year
upset that apple cart there by getting rid of him.
It would make sense, but I mean, if you're thinking about players that might have been in touch with Baleba, you know, the Cameroonian teammates, you'd suspect.
That's my theory on it.
Yoro used to play with him at Lille as well.
There you go, you see. So they're all on it.
He's actually hoping to be fit for the Arsenal game on Sunday. Onana, yeah. So,
is there any debate, discussion going on? Do you think in terms of that? Like, if he's fit, he's in. Is it that simple?
Is there debate? I think probably the only thing would be you've not played all pre-season, so I know it's goalkeepers, it's slightly different, but you still maybe have some reservations about that. But I think that if he's fit, he plays. I think he's aiming to play anyway. Let's see if it actually comes to pass. Because I mean, Bayern, he's fine, right? But it's not like you've got an incredible number 2 there that you can go, okay, let's.
He's no
get
Raymond
behind this guy.
Van der Gaal,
He's no Ricardo.
No.
No,
it probably is.
He probably is Ricardo. No Sergio Romero.
No, Ben Foster.
No.
Actually, he is Ben Foster. Yeah, he's Ben Foster. And that's why we don't want to play him. No, we're joking. Laurie, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Laurie, can we give Laurie a pause here, right?
Because
absolute soldier.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, kept going. I'm so sort of impressed with you.
So
impressed, sorry. So well done for that. And
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you on the Talk of the Devils, coughing your way through that.
Well, this is I need to go get some cough sweets immediately.
Get some cough sweets. Make sure you check out Talk of the Devils. We'll put the link to that in the description and the link to Laurie's latest articles on The Athletic as well. As always, Lizette. Do that again.
Catching.
As always, Laurie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us at home as well. This has been Inside United with Laurie Whitwell. We'll see you in a bit.
Yeah, he's coughing his guts up, bro.